Bautista began to train under Ramos's tutelage and in 1966 was promoted to student black belt. After working out with students in garages and in parks, Bautista opened his own school, the Kajukenbo Self-Defense Institute of Vallejo in 1968 on Benicia Road. Now, he also had a night job at that time, tending bar at a nightclub called the Coronado Inn in Vallejo.
Oh boy.
Some of y'all been there. Sometimes guys would get drunk and belligerent, and he had to settle disputes. And so the co-workers would just point to Emil and go, karate instructor, and that usually settled it. They were there for over 50 years, and in that time he became a senior Grandmaster. In addition to self-defense, he modeled and taught values to scores of students like honor, respect, and humility. Here's a brief video of Bautista performing pinions.
Wow.
Please join me in welcoming Senior Grandmaster Emil Bautista into the Armijo High School Hall of Fame. And we got a family member that's gonna come up?
Yeah?
Come on up.
I'm a family member.
I don't know. Who's going?
You got several. Who do you want?
You guys.
Okay. That's over.
Oh, Rob.
I'm sorry.
Oh, this way. You guys go all the way around. You go to the front. You go around that way. Yeah.
Jump it, Rob. Me too.
I really think you should have left there.
Better doing a different shot.
Good afternoon. I want to thank everyone for the honor of inducting Senior Grandmaster Bautista into this Hall of Fame. The thing about Grandmaster that a lot of people didn't know is that he actually wanted to be a gym teacher. Although he never went down that path, he ended up in the same way teaching sports to a lot of young men, keeping a lot of us off the streets. I started in 1979 under Grandmaster Bautista, knowing him only through my father, who was competitors with him in 1966. And I have to say, my mother made sure that I didn't deify my teacher by reminding me of the first time she met him. There were two women fighting over him out in the front lawn of the tournament. Now, you see the pictures of him, you can see why he was a handsome man and quite charming. He was great to all of his students. He always showed us how to be gracious, kind, and respectful to people that who may not even deserve that. So for us in this modern times, for us to have such a great teacher, I don't think my life would have been the same without him. I'd like to thank all of his family for letting me be up here to speak for him. There's a lot of them out here. Got a lot of students, thousands and thousands, I'm not exaggerating, hundreds of them made on to black belt. A lot of us are very involved in the art that he loved so much, and his presence is felt throughout the world because of his devotion to his art. Thank you.
Robert Rufus Bowen. The kind of artistic mathematical genius that class of 1964 grad Robert Rufus Bowen possessed was akin to the ones that gifted characters and based on a true story films like The Imitation Game and A Beautiful Mind, as well as the fictional Good Will Hunting had. Now, you might expect him to have been in the science club, the math club, the language club, and to have had multiple awards for the fruit of his nimble mind, and you would be correct. But he was also student body president and played tennis, basketball, and baseball. Now, I'm not a math wizard, but I know that being an athlete, student body president, and brainiac is like fully 3/5 of the Breakfast Club. When Robert Bowen moved from high school to college, he went through a transformation. He'd always hated his first name, so he adopted the name Rufus when he went to the University of Berkeley. Rufus is Nordic for red, and he had red hair. He was a fun guy. So many people talk about his genius, but also his conviviality and love for life. They remember playing volleyball with him and a bunch of friends. Now, Rufus Bowen's meteoric rise, he gained a full professorship at age 30 and was a ranking lecturer and authored on topics like dynamical systems, had a tragic fall. On July 30th, 1978, at only 31 years of age, Bowen suffered a brain aneurysm while vacationing and died. His tragic, untimely death was compounded by the near assurance that had he lived, he would have attained a serious honor, the Fields Medal, which is awarded every 4 years to distinguished mathematicians under 40 years of age. He was honored another way. Since 1981, the Bowen Lectures, supported by anonymous donors, have been held annually at UC Berkeley. The following is a different lecture from the University of Houston. This is from 2019. This is about Bowen.
But I want to spend the duration of my time talking about the approach via expansivity and specification. So this is a proof due to Bowen. And I will not say what these are immediately. Definitions will come in a bit. For the moment, let me simply say that these are two properties which are satisfied by transitive SFTs, by locally maximal hyperbolic sets. And I will spend today talking about how the specification property what role it plays in the proof, and then telling you how it can be generalized to something weaker using the notion of decomposition.
Did you guys get all that? Rufus Bowen's brother, Dr. William Bowen from the Armijo class of 1959, will speak on his behalf of his brother, but please join me in welcoming Robert Rufus Bowen into the Armijo High School Hall of Fame.
I'm Bill. I'm the older brother. Thank God. I was told I was smart, but boy was I dumb. A little bit of history. We came to this very small town of about 3,500 in 1950. And I was in 4th grade, Mrs. Williams' class, and went through with Gary Vaughn and many, many wonderful, wonderful kids. My brother followed along in my footsteps 5 years younger. His first day in kindergarten, he was judged mentally deficient. This is serious. He couldn't tie his shoes, and he was sent home for what the teacher thought would be another year. That teacher did not count on my mom, who herself had been a school teacher and would again be a school teacher in Fairfield. She went out and bought my brother a pair of cowboy boots. Now, the real transition took place in this town in the 50s. When I was a kid, there was no Little League. This high school was the palace. really was the palace, the old building. And the world revolved around that school. When my brother came up, the school was expanding further than it had been when I graduated in '59 along Washington Street. And he had the disadvantage of Little League and all of that, and became very adept at sports. I was mommy's boy, and my brother was daddy's boy. And my dad was the finance officer out of Travis. He made sure that Bob was very serious about his numbers. And when the NSF created a summer program for elementary school children at UC Berkeley, Bob went down, and he began to spend 2 months of every year at Berkeley in the math program. And by the time he was a graduating senior here, he had essentially finished his degree work in theoretical math at Berkeley. He also got his PhD ahead of me. Bob was a very bright guy, but he was extra special in a lot of ways. He is remembered by many Soviet mathematicians and scholars as being the person who helped save them. He worked diligently to get jobs for Jewish scientists who were in the Soviet Union in those bitter years and whose life had been made miserable by communism, and he was able to help get them jobs in the West. Now, when he died, the university created this Bowen lecture series, and I was invited to talk for the family. And this is what I said then, and I will say again. My brother and I were lucky to have 3 families. Our mom and dad were very special people. Very different, but very special. The second family was this town. You can't imagine, well, many of you can't imagine because you lived here. You can't imagine how different this place was from other places. This is a place where a friend of mine, on a hunting expedition, shot a deer that should not be shot. And when processed over at the sheriff's department, they discovered this, declared it excellent booty for the inmates at the jail, who would eat venison, much to their horror. And this young man was told that never again, never again. There were many things that were said about this town, but I'll tell you one thing we all understood. If you kicked over a trash can on your way home from school, before it hit the ground, your mother knew. Now, Coach Hopkins, after he retired, lay in a hospital bed at Kaiser down in Vallejo, and I was talking to him, and he said, well, Bob was maybe the most special basketball player I ever had. And I said, well, he wasn't that good, was he? He said, well, he was very good. He was a co-captain. But he was special in another way, because when he came back, we were having trouble with academics in the team. And Bob said he would tutor them. And I thought that was nice. And asked him what he would need. He said, well, I'll need about 50 decks of cards, a roulette wheel, and a few other basics. There were no problems with math with that class. And the team went on to do very well. Now, Bob was a mathematician, but as you saw, he was also something of a counterculture hippie. He had a wonderful life, and he remembered this as his second family. The third family for both of us was the campus at Berkeley. We were blessed. And I think all of you in this room understand that you too were blessed to be here for those precious years of your young adult life. Thank you.
Ernest Crowley. In 1908, as a 12-year-old boy, Suisun City resident Ernest Charles Crowley lost his sight in a hunting accident. He attended the Bay Area's California School for the Deaf and Blind and graduated from Armijo in 1917. In 1921, he married Georgia Herbert, who later became a Justice of the Peace in Sonoma County for 21 years. That same year, he graduated from the University of California with a degree in law and earned a Doctor of Jurisprudence degree in 1923. Ernest Crowley opened up a lawyer's office in Fairfield and defended his clients all from memory, no notes. Locals back then were used to seeing him navigating Fairfield streets to and from the old courthouse and his office twice a day without using a cane or a seeing eye dog. Crowley was elected to the California State Assembly in 1928. He developed a bill that enabled people living in federal housing projects to vote, which was forbidden before his intervention. He also introduced Assembly Bill 117 in 1929 that provided a pension for the blind. For many years, he was chairman of the Assembly's Constitutional Amendment Committee and was a member of the powerful Ways and Means Committee. His wife, Georgia, attended almost every session until 1943 to read for her husband. She became an honorary member of the Assembly by unanimous vote in 1941. Ernest Crowley died in 1952 of a heart attack while still in office. Georgia Crowley died 18 years later. The California Council for the Blind enshrined Ernest Crowley into its Hall of Fame in 1996. The power couple's name lives on in Fairfield on a street off Pennsylvania Avenue, Crowley Lane. And also, please everyone join me with applause and acclaim in welcoming Ernest Crowley into the Armijo High School Hall of Fame. Lucy here? She's not here? Oh, we'll get this to Lucy, their granddaughter. I talked to her a couple weeks ago. All right. Bill Fuller. William Bill Fuller taught at Armijo from 1968 to 1996. He coached football, tennis, and golf. The 1972 football team went 8-1 and had Armijo's best record since the 1930s with Buck Bailey. Their only loss was to Cordova that season. They were the Cardiac Kids and won 4 games by 7 points or less. Fuller coached tennis at the school for many years, leading them to the first 2 San Joaquin section titles in 1982 and 1983. Now for the rest of this introduction, I'm going to use the comments of others, and I grouped them from funny to poignant. So we're going to start with the bald head and move on to the heart. This is from John Campbell. He said, I always called Coach Fuller Mr. Clean because of his bald head. And this is from Patty Ray. She said, oh man, I was just telling someone how I was late to PE and told Coach Linville I was late because the glare from Mr. Fuller's head blinded me. And I had to stop and let my eyes adjust. And on to the poignant. Armijo High School Hall of Fame inaugural member George Martin wrote in his book, Just Around the Bend, My Journey for 9/11, that Armijo football coach Bill Fuller pulled me aside once and said, I had a great responsibility in terms of setting an example for classmates, underclassmen, and he specifically mentioned my brother.
Well, here's a story about the most uncoordinated, unathletic girl in the Armijo High School class of 78, and how taking courses in PE from Bill Fuller taught her that athletics wasn't such a bad thing after all. I had Bill for boating safety, archery, badminton, golf, cycling, all kinds of things that I've used throughout my life and really enjoyed time well spent. I also had Bill for driver's training, and I have to say that I'm a good driver, and I teach others how to drive using his techniques. And what I want to really say about him, though, is that he taught a lot about the things that make people good people. Honesty, integrity, personal accountability, responsibility, and helping others. He taught the young men in his classes to respect their mothers, and he helped young men who didn't have dads find jobs in the summer and learn valuable skills that they, I'm sure, carry with them to this day. He was really a wonderful man and an excellent example of what a teacher should be, and I wish he was here to receive this honor. Thank you.
Please join me in welcoming Bill Fuller into the Armijo High School Hall of Fame. And now, to speak on his behalf, is his friend and colleague, Armijo High School Hall of Famer, Jay Dahl.
Buckle your seatbelts, I'm a fast talker. First of all, I'd like to thank Tony and the committee for doing this Hall of Fame thing. I think it's something that should have been done a long time ago, and it's really well deserved. I'd like to say congratulations to all those entering today. It is definitely an elite group of individuals and families. Bill Fuller. Now, Tony took half my stuff over here. We probably should have shared notes here. But let me give you some information about Bill before he came to Armijo. He played football at El Camino High School in Sacramento, then went to Sacramento State and was all-league for 3 years at Sacramento State. In 1965, he was named to the small school All-American team and drafted by the Baltimore Colts in 1965 also. After that, he spent 2 years in the Coast Guard. He was a teacher and coach at Armijo for 30 years. And again, I don't want to repeat the things Tony said. On a personal note, Bill, the first time I met Bill was when I was a sophomore in high school at the other school across town. And as Tony said, his nickname was Mr. Clean. And we didn't ever say that to his face, but I don't understand where they get the Mr. Clean from, you know? A lifetime friend of mine who played football at Fairfield for Bill Fuller, who was a very good football player himself, was all-league for 2 years, went on to tell me on numerous occasions that Bill Fuller was the best coach he ever had. Without question, he was a well-respected teacher and coach. I am humbled and honored to have the opportunity to see Bill Fuller inducted into the Hall of Fame. Thank you.
Nelda Mundy. Nelda Mundy was born and raised in Texas, and she picked cotton there growing up. Her grandmother, who was the first of her ancestors to be born free, died in the 1970s at over 100 years old, after having the immensely soul-affirming satisfaction of seeing her grandchildren graduate from college. Mundy wanted people to experience the benefits of education. Before coming to California, she lived in Minnesota and volunteered at Stillwater State Prison. There she tutored inmates so they could get their GEDs. One of them was so appreciative he created this likeness of her back in the 1970s. Nelda Mundy taught business and business law at Armijo and was tough, kind, loving, thorough, impactful, and unforgettable. Her former students still take pieces of her with them in their life journeys and career paths. In 1984, Nelda married Solano County Deputy Ken Mundy, and their union was all too brief, as Ken Mundy died about 4 years later of cancer. Nelda Mundy herself would die of cancer in 1996. At Nelda Mundy's memorial service, guests were invited to write a memory down about her on index cards. Parents wrote notes thanking her for helping them reconnect with their children. Others wrote thanking them for the influence she had in their child's life. One lady met her because she had left her purse on top of her car, and Mundy found it, tracked the woman down, and they became friends. She was that kind of person. Nelda Mundy was one of several notable on a list of potential names for a new elementary school being planned in Fairfield. Nelda Mundy Elementary School opened in 1998.
Well,
Tracy Beasley Hiltz, Nelda Mundy's daughter, said, "When I went to the dedication of her school, a young man came up to me after the ceremony. He was in tears, and he said, 'I'm a teacher because your mom was my teacher. And now I'm grateful to be teaching at the school named after her.'" Please join me in welcoming Nelda Mundy into the Armijo High School Hall of Fame. And here's her daughter, Tracy Beasley Hiltz.
I'm very grateful to be here just to represent a powerfully good woman. My mom's been in heaven for 27 years now, but the legacy of her goodness to me and to others just remains and carries me through my lonely days without her. But I'm so grateful for the impact that she has had, and actually for the impact that my mom's family has had. Williams is her maiden name, and there are so many students and people throughout this community that have felt the impact of my mom and her sisters and her brothers and her in-laws, her brothers-in-law, who've all been teachers or principals or school support members throughout Fairfield. I had an aunt or an uncle or someone at every level of my schooling here in Fairfield, from elementary, middle school, and high school. I mean, my mom taught at Fairfield High for 1 year, and then when got religion and went to Armijo. Actually, she knew Armijo needed religion, and that's why she went there. But at every level, I had someone in my family teaching, and so there was that space of, there wasn't much that I could do to get into trouble because everybody would know from elementary to middle school to high school. But I'm grateful for the legacy of education, but I'm also grateful for the legacy of just valuing life and respect, because that was what my mom was known for. If you were in her classroom, you would know you need to come to her class prepared to not just be there to learn, but to be connected, to be in relationship with other students and even with her. If, for example, if a young lady maybe wasn't dressed exactly as my mom would think was appropriate, she had sweaters in a locker in her room, and she would say, "Did you oversleep today? It looks like you forgot to get all the way dressed. So go to the locker and finish getting dressed and cover up." And then her most famous one was she would tell the young man, "Pull up your pants because they don't pay me enough to look at the crack of your behind." So, and I mean, that was just the kind of person, the kind of tenacity that she had. She taught respect. She lived respect. And so I would say, the priorities in my mom's life, she loved her Lord Jesus Christ. She loved her family. And she was so grateful that God had called her to be a teacher. And she lived that out with all of her heart. And that's why I believe that the legacy of who she is, I love the fact that when my mom's at this school that's named after, my mom is gone, but hundreds of times a day, my mom's name is said when they say, "Thank you for calling Nelda Mundy, thank you for calling Nelda Mundy School," and on and on. And my hope is that the loving goodness that she established in her life, that as that continues on into the lives of others, that well beyond the years of my mom being in heaven, what will remain is the impact of a woman whose heart stood for education, whose heart stood for valuing people, whose heart stood for valuing the life of one another. So I'm grateful to accept this honor of my mom coming into the Armijo Hall of Fame, and to let you know you are honoring a very, very good woman. So thank you.
Dan O. Root II, Mr. Suisun City. That is the honorary nickname bestowed on Daniel Ornon Root II. He was a Navy veteran, teacher, school superintendent, public servant, community advocate, and a husband and father. Dan O. Root II's father was Ross Root, not Dan O. Root I. That would be his grandfather.